The champagne was worth more than the average American's car. The art on the walls purchased from private Christie's auctions could fund a small nation. This was the world of Nathaniel Beaumont, a man who didn't just live in the lap of luxury. He'd built the lap. But on a humid August night in his Hamptons estate, amidst the clinking of baccarat crystal and the low hum of immense power, none of that mattered. All that mattered was a 4-word whisper from a woman he'd barely noticed, a Haitian maid named Elodie. A whisper in French that saved his life and unraveled a conspiracy of breathtaking greed. The air at the Beaumont estate in Sagaponack was thick with the scent of money salt water and night-blooming jasmine. It was Nathaniel Beaumont's annual summer gala, an event less about celebration and more about the reinforcement of a dynasty. At 58, Nathaniel was a titan of private equity, a man whose firm, Beaumont Capital Partners, could make or break international corporations with a single phone call. He was sharp with a predator's stillness, his Savile Row suit hanging on him not as clothing, but as a second skin. His eyes, the color of a stormy Atlantic, missed nothing. Or so he thought. His wife, Cassandra, 30 years his junior, was a vision in a flowing emerald gown by Giambattista Valli. She was his third wife, a former art gallery curator, with a beauty that seemed both delicate and impossibly resilient. She moved through the party like a ship under full sail, a charming smile affixed, but her eyes held a certain distance, a private calculation that Nathaniel had long ago stopped trying to decipher. The guest list was a who's who of Wall Street tech and politics. Senators traded pleasantries with venture capitalists, their voices a low murmur beneath the string quartet playing softly on the veranda. Liveried staff hired from a top-tier New York agency for the event moved silently among them, their faces professionally blank. One of those faces belonged to Elodie Baptiste. She was new, a temporary hire for the summer season. Slender and quiet, with luminous dark skin and hair pulled back in a severe bun, she was the picture of unobtrusive service. But unlike many of the other staff, Elodie wasn't just going through the motions. She was watching. Her gaze, when she thought no one was looking, was unnervingly intense. She wasn't star-struck by the wealth. She seemed to be searching for something within it, a crack in the gleaming facade. Her station for the evening was near the grand mahogany bar, where a sommelier was pouring from magnums of Dom Perignon. From this vantage point, she had a clear view of the main conversational cluster, Nathaniel, Cassandra, and Leland Finch. Leland Finch was Nathaniel's protégé, his right-hand man, the chief operating officer of Beaumont Capital. He was handsome, in a way that bankers often are, polished, confident, with a perfect smile that never quite reached his eyes. He'd been with Nathaniel for 20 years, plucked from the analyst pool at Goldman Sachs, and molded into a formidable deal-maker. To the outside world, their relationship was one of paternal loyalty. Leland was the son Nathaniel never had. "The Purdue acquisition is a done deal, Nat." Leland was saying, his voice a smooth baritone. "The board folded this afternoon. We got it for a song." Nathaniel nodded, a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. "Good." They were arrogant. Arrogance is expensive. He took a sip of his scotch. Cassandra laid a perfectly manicured hand on her husband's arm. "Darling, must you talk business? It's a party." "Business is all there is, my love," Nathaniel said, though he softened the words with a thin smile. As the evening wore on, the main event approached the ceremonial toast. It was a tradition. Nathaniel would unveil a bottle of wine from his legendary cellar, something impossibly rare, a liquid artifact, and share it with his inner circle as a symbol of shared success. Tonight's selection was a 1947 Cheval Blanc, a wine so mythic its price was purely academic. Leland himself had retrieved it from the cellar an hour earlier, handling the velvet-lined box with the reverence of a priest handling a holy relic. Leland took charge of the decanting, his movements precise. He was a connoisseur, a passion he shared with Nathaniel. He poured a small amount into a glass for Nathaniel to taste, then began to fill the glasses for the small group that had gathered Nathaniel Cassandra, a prominent tech billionaire, named Wade Carmichael, and himself. Elodie, tasked with clearing empty glasses, moved closer to the group. Her movements were fluid, silent. No one paid her any mind. She was just part of the furniture. But her eyes were fixed on Leland Finch. She watched his hands, the way his fingers curled around the neck of the decanter, the minute, almost imperceptible hesitation as he poured the final glass Nathaniel's glass. She saw him shield the glass with his body for a fraction of a second, his left hand making a tiny, furtive movement near the rim. It was nothing, a trick of the light, a nervous tick. It was a gesture so small, so insignificant, that 99 out of 100 people would have missed it. But Elodie was the one who didn't. Her heart began to pound against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat beneath her crisp black uniform. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind, a memory from a childhood in Port-au-Prince. Les yeux voient ce que l'esprit sait déjà. The eyes see what the mind already knows. Leland presented the glass to Nathaniel with a flourish. To you, Nathaniel, to another victory. May your empire and our fortunes continue to grow. The others raised their glasses. To Nathaniel, they echoed. Nathaniel Beaumont, master of his universe, smiled. He brought the crystal glass, shimmering with the dark ruby liquid, towards his lips. The scent of black currant leather and something else, something metallic and faintly bitter he couldn't place, wafted up. He was a millimeter from drinking. From behind him, a voice, barely a breath, whispered in flawless Parisian French. Monsieur ne buvez pas ça. Sir, don't drink that. The world stopped. The string quartet seemed to fade into silence. The low hum of conversation vanished. Nathaniel Beaumont, a man who hadn't frozen in the face of market crashes, hostile takeovers, or federal investigations, froze on the spot. The glass trembled in his hand, its precious contents threatening to spill. He didn't turn around. He didn't have to. The voice was a ghost, an impossibility. Who, for a long second, Nathaniel remained motionless, a statue carved from disbelief. The French words echoed in the private space of his mind, stark and terrifyingly clear. Ne buvez pas ça. Don't drink that. It wasn't the warning itself that was so shocking, but the source. The voice was female, low, and spoken with an accent so pure it could have come from the 6th arrondissement of Paris. It did not belong to the world of Hampton's cater-waiters. His instincts, honed over 30 years of navigating shark-infested boardrooms, screamed at him. This was not a joke. This was not a mistake. This was a signal, a flare shot up in the dark. Leland Finch's smile was still plastered on his face. Nathaniel, everything all right? Cassandra looked at him, her brow furrowed with a mixture of concern and impatience. Darling, the toast. He had to make a decision in a nanosecond. To drink would be foolish. To question the warning openly would be catastrophic, tipping his hand to a potential enemy standing right in front of him. Panic was a luxury he could not afford. Control. That was his mantra. With a motion that was a masterpiece of calculated clumsiness, Nathaniel's hand jerked, as if suddenly afflicted by a tremor. The baccarat crystal glass holding wine worth over $10,000 slipped from his grasp. It hit the polished marble floor with a sickeningly loud crash, shattering into 1,000 pieces. The mythic 1947 Cheval Blanc spattered across the floor and onto the toe of his John Lobb shoe like a splash of dark blood. A collective gasp went through the small circle. "Oh my God, Nathaniel!" Cassandra cried out, stepping back. Leland's face was a canvas of shock and disappointment. "The Cheval Blanc. Are you all right, Nat? Your hand?" "It's nothing," Nathaniel said, his voice a low growl. He waved his hand dismissively. "A sudden cramp, my apologies. How clumsy of me." He looked down at the mess, his mind racing. He needed to isolate the source of the warning. He scanned the staff behind him without moving his head. His eyes landed on her. The quiet one. The new maid, Elodie Baptiste. She was looking at the floor, her face impassive, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. It was her. "Someone clean this up," Nathaniel commanded, his tone sharp and final. The authority in his voice cut through the momentary chaos. Staff members hurried forward with dustpans and cloths. Nathaniel turned to his guests, forcing a strained smile. "Forgive me. A moment of weakness. Leland, perhaps you could open something a little less irreplaceable. Let's not let my foolishness ruin the evening." He had created a diversion, a plausible excuse, but now he needed to act. He caught Elodie's eye for a fraction of a second, a silent command passing between them. He then turned and walked away from the group, heading towards the quiet solitude of his library. He didn't look back to see if she followed. He knew she would. The library was his sanctuary. Floor-to-ceiling shelves of rare first editions, the smell of old paper and leather, a massive fireplace cold in the summer heat. It was a room built for silent contemplation and ruthless decisions. He walked to the enormous oak desk, his back to the door, and waited. A moment later, the door opened and closed with a soft click. He heard her light footsteps on the Persian rug. "You will tell me everything," Nathaniel said, his voice low and dangerous, not turning around. "You will tell me who you are, why you speak French like a native, and why I should believe you and not the man I have trusted for 2 decades. There was a pause. He could hear her breathe. "My name is Elodie Baptiste," she said, her voice steady, the flawless French replaced by English with a faint, melodic Haitian Creole accent. "I learned the language as a child in Port-au-Prince. My grandmother was the personal attendant for the French ambassador's family for 30 years. This explained the accent. It was the French of diplomats and old money, not the French of a classroom. That's the how. Now the why," Nathaniel demanded, finally turning to face her. He towered over her, an imposing figure of wealth and power. But Elodie did not flinch. Her dark eyes met his without fear. "Because I was watching Mr. Finch," she said simply. "I have been watching him since I started working here 3 weeks ago." "Why?" The word was a whip crack. "When he was decanting the wine, he shielded your glass with his body," she explained, her words precise. His other hand came from his jacket pocket. It was a small motion, very fast. He held something between his thumb and forefinger. A vial. I saw the light catch it for a second. He tilted it over your glass. It looked like he was just adjusting his cufflink, but he was not. Nathaniel stared at her, his mind processing the accusation. Leland. It was unthinkable. Leland was his creation, his most loyal soldier. He owed everything to Nathaniel. The motive wasn't there. Or was it the COO of Beaumont? Capital would become the CEO if Nathaniel were to die suddenly. The empire would fall into his lap. "You saw a reflection," he pressed, playing devil's advocate. "A trick of the light. No, monsieur." Elodie said, her voice firm. "I saw intention, and I saw something else. When you dropped the glass, everyone looked shocked. Mrs. Beaumont looked annoyed. But Mr. Finch, for 1 second before he composed his face, he looked furious. It was not disappointment for the lost wine. It was the rage of a man whose plan has just failed. Nathaniel's blood ran cold. He had seen that look on Leland's face before, but only in the heat of a brutal negotiation directed at their adversaries. Never at him. He had always assumed it was a shared look, the ferocity of the wolf pack. Had it been directed at him all along? He walked over to a small hidden panel in the bookshelf and pressed it. A section of books slid back to reveal a state-of-the-art security monitor system. He typed in a code. The staff is managed by an agency, Thornton Services. Nathaniel mused more to himself than to her. They vet their people thoroughly. So how did you get here, Elodie Baptiste, someone with your perceptiveness? The agency placed me, she replied calmly. My record is perfect. I am an excellent domestic worker. No one looks twice at a maid. The simple truth of that statement hit Nathaniel with the force of a physical blow. He lived in a world surrounded by people, yet he was utterly alone. He paid for loyalty, for service, for companionship. He had never considered that the most invisible person in the room might be the only one truly watching his back. He looked at the young woman before him. She was an enigma. A maid from Haiti who spoke Parisian French and possessed the observational skills of a trained intelligence operative. "Stay here. Do not leave this room," he commanded. He walked to the door, his mind already formulating a plan. The party was a charade now. The smiles of his guests were the grinning of skulls. He had to maintain the pretense, but the hunt had begun. He closed the library door, leaving Elodie alone in the heart of his empire, a silent guardian he never knew he had. His next stop was to find Leland, to look his oldest friend in the eye and see the serpent hiding there. Nathaniel Beaumont didn't find Leland. Instead, Leland found him. As Nathaniel stepped back into the hum of the party, feigning a casual air, Leland intercepted him near the grand staircase. His face was a mask of solicitous concern. "Nat, are you sure you're okay?" Leland asked, his voice low. "You gave us all a scare. I've never seen you do something like that. Maybe you should see a doctor. A sudden tremor could be a neurological sign." Nathaniel looked directly into Leland's eyes, searching for the flicker of rage Elodie had described. He saw nothing but practiced empathy. It was unnervingly perfect. Leland was either a deeply loyal friend or a psychopath. "I'm fine, Lee," Nathaniel said, his tone dismissive. "Just tired. Too many late nights closing the Purdue deal." He placed a hand on Leland's shoulder, a gesture of camaraderie that felt alien and cold. "Thank you for your concern." As Leland nodded and moved off to reassure other guests, Nathaniel's mind was a whirlwind. Elodie's story was compelling, but it was just that, a story. An observation from a new maid against 20 years of shared history with Leland. He needed more. He needed proof. He made his excuses, claiming a sudden migraine, and instructed Cassandra to play the gracious host for the remainder of the evening. She agreed, a flicker of resentment in her eyes at his abandonment of their own party. But she complied. Nathaniel retreated back to the library. He found Elodie standing by the window, looking out at the glittering lights on the lawn. She turned as he entered, her expression unreadable. "Tell me more about yourself," Nathaniel said, sitting in one of the large leather armchairs. It was not a request. "Everything." Elodie hesitated for a moment, then began to speak. Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of a history he could scarcely imagine. She spoke of her childhood in Port-au-Prince, not in the slums, but in a modest, proud home. Her father, Jean-Pierre Baptiste, was not a diplomat or a politician. He was an agronomist, a man who loved the soil. He had inherited a small but prosperous coffee plantation in the mountains above the city, one that had been in their family for generations. He grew a rare high-altitude Arabica bean that was prized by a few exclusive European buyers. "My father was a good man," Elodie said, her gaze distant. "He was not a businessman. He trusted people. He believed in handshakes and a man's word." Nathaniel remained silent, letting her talk. He knew this type of man. He had built his empire on devouring them. "About 10 years ago," she continued, "a new company came to Haiti, an investment group from the Caymans. They called themselves Viridian Holdings. They wanted to consolidate the smaller plantations into a larger cooperative. They promised modernization access to bigger markets' wealth for everyone." A cold knot formed in Nathaniel's stomach. He knew the playbook. "My father resisted. He loved his land, his methods. He didn't want to be part of a faceless corporation. But Viridian was aggressive. They bought the land around him. They choked off his access to water. They outbid him for local labor. They made it impossible for him to operate." Her voice trembled slightly, the first crack in her stoic demeanor. "He took out loans to try and fight them to stay afloat. The bank he borrowed from was acquired by a subsidiary of Viridian. They called in his debt all at once. He was ruined. He lost everything. The land, our home, our name." "And your father?" Nathaniel asked, his voice quiet. "A few weeks after we were evicted, he died," Elodie said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They said it was an accident, a car crash on a mountain road. The brakes failed. No one investigated." The silence in the room was heavy, thick with the ghosts of a story that was all too common in the world of global finance. It was the story of the shark and the minnow. "I am sorry for your loss." Nathaniel said the words, feeling hollow and inadequate. "I was 19. Elodie continued, her composure returning. "My mother had passed years earlier. I had to take care of my grandmother. I took the only work I could find, cleaning serving. My grandmother, with her connections from the embassy, helped me get positions with reputable families. We eventually made our way to the United States. She passed away last year." Nathaniel looked at this young woman, seeing her for the first time. She was not just a maid. She was a survivor. She was the daughter of a man he might have crushed himself on his way to the top. "What does this have to do with Leland Finch?" he asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. Elodie walked over to the desk. "When I was hired by the agency for the summer position here, they gave me a welcome packet, a brief overview of the Beaumont household. It included the names of the key personnel at Beaumont Capital Partners. I saw his name and his photograph." She paused, taking a deep breath, but I recognized him from before. 10 years ago, the man from Viridian Holdings who came to our home to deliver the final eviction notice. The man who looked my father in the eye and told him he was worthless. It was a younger version of the man you call your most trusted friend. He didn't use the name Leland Finch then. He used a different name, but it was him. I have never forgotten his face. Nathaniel felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. Leland in Haiti. It made no sense. Leland's work was in New York, London, Tokyo. He handled tech and media acquisitions, not Caribbean agriculture. "That's a very serious accusation," Nathaniel said, his voice strained. "You're saying Leland operated under an alias in a shady real estate deal that destroyed your family. I am not saying it. I am telling you," Elodie stated, her eyes locking onto his. "And I believe that whatever he was doing in Haiti for Viridian Holdings, he was doing it for Beaumont Capital. Or for you." The implication was a dagger twisting in his gut. Had Leland undertaken some dirty work on his behalf, a black operation he was never meant to know about, It was possible. In his world, plausible deniability was an art form. He often gave his senior partners broad directives and trusted them to handle the messy details. Acquire the assets, I don't care how. Was Elodie's family collateral damage in one of his own forgotten conquests? Why say nothing until now? Nathaniel demanded. Why risk everything on a whispered warning tonight? Because for 10 years he has been a ghost, a face without a name. Elodie said, her voice rising with a decade of suppressed pain. When I saw his picture, I knew I had found him. I took this job to get close to him, to learn about him, to find a way to expose him for what he did to my father. I didn't know what I would do. But tonight I saw him with that vial and I knew. The man who destroyed my father's life was trying to end yours. And in that moment, justice for my father meant saving you. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, the leather groaning under his weight. The entire foundation of his world had been fractured. His closest ally was potentially his greatest enemy, a man with a secret history of ruthlessness that might even surpass his own. And his savior was a young woman with every reason to hate him, and his entire world a ghost from Port-au-Prince who had appeared in his home to settle a decade-old score. He needed undeniable proof, and he knew just the man to get it. He picked up a secure satellite phone from a drawer in his desk, a device that bypassed all conventional networks. He dialed a number from memory. After 2 rings, a gravelly voice answered with a single, clipped word. Yes, Ari, Nathaniel said. I have a situation. I need you in the Hamptons. Now. Ari Cohen arrived not in a flashy car, but in a nondescript Ford sedan that blended in with the caterers' vehicles, still parked discreetly on a service road. He was a man in his late 60s with a weathered face, kind eyes that belied a mind like a steel trap, and the quiet, unassuming presence of a retired history professor. In reality, he was a former head of operations for Mossad, Israel's national intelligence agency. For the past 15 years, he had run a private security and intelligence firm in New York, catering to a handful of clients who, like Nathaniel, had problems that couldn't be solved by the police. Nathaniel met him, not in the house, but in a small guest house, by the pool swept for listening devices, by Ari himself, within minutes of his arrival. On a sterile metal tray lay the evidence, a shard of the shattered baccarat glass, and a small damp cloth that had been used to sop up the spilled wine from the marble floor. Digitalis, Ari said, after examining the cloth with a portable testing kit. His voice was calm, almost academic. Specifically a purified glycoside compound, not the crude stuff you get from boiling foxglove leaves. This is pharmaceutical grade, probably custom synthesized. Odorless, largely tasteless in a complex wine. It would have induced rapid cardiac arrest within the hour. The coroner would have likely ruled it a massive, and for a man your age and under your level of stress, entirely plausible heart attack. Nathaniel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Professional. Very, Ari agreed. The method is clean. The delivery at a party surrounded by people is bold. The choice of target, well, that's the interesting part. Nathaniel recounted the evening's events in precise detail, from Leland's retrieval of the wine to Elodie's whispered warning and her incredible backstory. Ari listened without interruption, his expression unchanging. A maid from Haiti with a 10-year-old grudge, Ari mused when Nathaniel had finished. It's a story worthy of Dumas. If she's telling the truth, she's a remarkable woman. If she's lying, she's an even more remarkable one. What's your assessment? Nathaniel asked. The poison is real. The attempt was real, Ari said, packing his kit. That makes her warning credible. Her backstory provides a powerful motive for her to be hyper-aware of Finch. It all fits. But in my business, we don't trust stories that fit perfectly. We dissect them. Ari's team, 2 discreet agents who had arrived with him, got to work. One began a deep-dive background check on Elodie Baptiste, verifying every detail of her story from her birth in Haiti to her grandmother's employment at the French embassy. The other was tasked with the near-impossible finding any trace of a Viridian Holdings and connecting it to Leland Finch or uncomfortably Beaumont Capital. Meanwhile, Ari himself took over personal surveillance. "You will act as if nothing has happened," he instructed Nathaniel. "Go to the office tomorrow. Hold your meetings. Interact with Finch as you always do. Let him think his plan failed because you were clumsy, not because you were warned. He'll have to try again. And when he does, we'll be waiting." The next morning was one of the most difficult of Nathaniel Beaumont's life. He rode into Manhattan in his Maybach, the city skyline, a familiar sight that now seemed hostile. Walking into the gleaming chrome and glass lobby of Beaumont Capital, he felt like a stranger in his own kingdom. Leland was waiting for him outside his office, holding a tablet. "Morning, Nat. The final numbers from the Purdue deal are in. They're even better than we thought." He was smiling the same confident, winning smile as always. There was no trace of malice, no hint of murderous rage. It was terrifying. "Excellent work, Lee," Nathaniel said, forcing himself to clap Leland on the shoulder. "Let's review them in the conference room in an hour." As the day wore on, Nathaniel played his part. He barked orders, made decisions, and debated strategy with the very man who had allegedly tried to murder him less than 24 hours earlier. It was a surreal performance. Every gesture from Leland, every word was now filtered through a lens of suspicion. A simple offer to get him a coffee felt loaded with menace. A question about his health seemed like a probe for weakness. While Nathaniel played the part of the unsuspecting king, Ari Cohen was setting up his own command center in a rented office across the street, his lenses trained on the 50th floor of the Beaumont building. He also placed a discreet listening device in Nathaniel's office and had a man inside the IT department, a contact cultivated years ago, mirroring all of Leland's digital communications. Late that afternoon, Ari called Nathaniel on the secure line. "Our girl checks out," Ari said. "Elodie Baptiste is exactly who she says she is. Jean-Pierre Baptiste's coffee plantation, Café Le Ciel, was bankrupted and absorbed by a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands 10 years ago. The corporation's name was Viridian Holdings. It was dissolved 2 years later after liquidating all its assets." "Can you link it to Leland?" Nathaniel asked, his heart pounding. "Not directly. The ownership records are a labyrinth of offshore accounts and proxy lawyers. It's a professional cutout designed to be untraceable," Ori admitted. "Whoever set it up knew what they were doing. It was a dead end." Nathaniel felt a surge of frustration, but Ari wasn't finished. "However," he continued, "we may have a different problem. My team has been running parallel surveillance on your wife." "Cassandra?" Nathaniel was taken aback. "Why, cui bono who benefits," Ari stated simply. "She's the young wife of a much older, very wealthy man. She would inherit a significant fortune. It's standard procedure. And she is hiding something," Ari said. "She made 2 calls this morning from a burner phone to a number we've traced to a man named Niko Petrovich. Mr. Petrovic is not a florist or a tennis coach. He's a known blackmailer and loan shark with ties to the Eastern European mob in Brighton Beach." Nathaniel felt his world tilt on its axis again. Cassandra, involved with mobsters. It seemed impossible. She was an art historian, a creature of museums and charity galas. This afternoon, Ari continued. She left the estate and drove to a diner in Queens. She met with Petrovich. One of my people photographed the meeting. She passed him a large manila envelope. He did not look pleased to receive it. The serpent he was hunting might not be Leland after all. Or perhaps there was more than one snake in his garden. He had been so focused on his right-hand man that he had completely ignored the woman sleeping in his bed. The warning had come from Elodie. The poison was real. Leland had the opportunity. But Cassandra had a powerful secret motive. Was it possible that Elodie saw what she wanted to see, coloured by her own history with Leland? Could Cassandra have been the true architect of the plot, somehow manipulating events to frame Leland, if it failed? The complexity of the betrayal deepened. Nathaniel Beaumont was trapped in a web of his own making, surrounded by the people he had chosen, any one of whom might want him dead. And his only true ally was a quiet Haitian maid with a ghost of her own. The drive back to the Hamptons was silent and tense. Nathaniel watched the familiar landscape blur past, but his thoughts were a maelstrom. Cassandra, Niko Petrovich, a burner phone, a clandestine meeting in Queens. The facts were a series of brutalist structures in his mind, ugly and undeniable. He found her in their bedroom, a sprawling suite overlooking the Atlantic. The setting sun cast long shadows across the cream-coloured carpets. She was sitting at her vanity, brushing her hair, still wearing a stunning daytime dress of emerald silk. She looked up as he entered her reflection in the mirror, momentarily startled, before settling into a practiced, welcoming smile. "Darling, you're home early," she said, her voice light. Tired of conquering the world for one day. Nathaniel didn't return the smile. He walked over and stood behind her, his reflection joining hers in the mirror. He looked old, he thought. Tired. She looked so young, so vibrant. "I had a meeting in the city today," he said, his voice flat, "with a man named Ari Cohen. Do you know him?" Cassandra's hand paused the silver brush hovering over her auburn hair. A flicker of something fear recognition crossed her features before being swiftly erased. "No. Should I?" "He's in the information business?" Nathaniel continued, his eyes locked on hers in the mirror. "He told me about another meeting, one that happened this afternoon at a diner in Queens, between you and a man named Niko Petrovich." The brush clattered from her hand, falling onto the marble vanity top. The colour drained from her face. She turned on her stool to face him, her beautiful features collapsing into a mask of pure panic. "Nathaniel, I can explain." "Can you?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. "Can you explain the burner phone? Can you explain the manila envelope? Can you explain why my wife is meeting with a mob-connected blackmailer?" Tears welled in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks. "It's not what you think. It has nothing to do with you, with us. Everything you do has to do with me." He thundered, his control finally snapping. The rage he had been suppressing all day erupted. "You are my wife. Your secrets are my liabilities. Did you think I wouldn't find out?" Cassandra flinched as if struck. She began to sob, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. "I was going to tell you," she choked out between gasps. "I swear I was. I was so ashamed." He waited, his anger receding into a cold, hard knot of dread. He had seen this scene play out 1,000 times in business, the moment of leverage, the breaking point, where the truth, however ugly, comes spilling out. "Before I met you," she began, her voice a raw whisper, "I wasn't the person you see today. My family had money once, but my father lost it all in bad investments. When I was in my early 20s, trying to make it in the New York art scene, I was desperate. I made a mistake, a very big one." She took a shaky breath. I was working at a small gallery in Chelsea. We were struggling. I got involved with a man who dealt in art forgery. Not selling them, but using forged paintings as collateral for loans. It was supposed to be a one-time thing, a way to get an infusion of cash to save the gallery. I helped authenticate a piece I knew was fake. Nathaniel listened, his face an impassive mask. This was the part of her past she had always glossed over the years, between her family's financial ruin and her emergence as a polished curator. The deal went bad, she continued, wiping her eyes. The man I was working with disappeared. But Niko Petrovich was one of the men who was cheated. He knew about my involvement. He's held it over my head ever since. When I met you, he saw his golden opportunity. He started blackmailing me. Not for huge amounts at first, just enough to keep me terrified. He has documents, affidavits, everything needed to prove my role. It would cause a massive scandal. It would destroy my reputation and humiliate you. The money, Nathaniel said. The envelope today. It was the last payment, she sobbed. He demanded one final large sum to disappear for good. I've been selling off the jewelry you bought me piece by piece to pay him. Today was the final installment. I swear, Nathaniel, it was just about my stupid, foolish past. It had nothing to do with anything else. He looked at her, truly looked at her. He saw not a cold-blooded conspirator, but a terrified woman trapped by a youthful mistake, too proud and too scared to confess it to her powerful husband. The pieces fit. It explained her secrecy, her tension, her connection to a dangerous man. It was a betrayal of trust, yes, but it wasn't a plot to commit murder. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, the anger gone, replaced by a profound weariness. Did you think I couldn't handle it, that I couldn't crush a man like Petrovic? I was ashamed, she cried. I didn't want you to see me as I was. I wanted to be the woman you thought you married, not some foolish girl who got involved with criminals. He reached out and tilted her chin up, forcing her to look at him. There will be no more secrets, Cassandra. You will tell Ari everything. You will give him Petrovich's number, his address, every detail you know. This ends now. She nodded, relief flooding her features. Yes, anything. He left her there, weeping, in her emerald silk dress. He walked out onto the balcony, the cool sea breeze doing little to calm his turbulent thoughts. Cassandra was not the serpent. She was just another victim in her own way. The red herring had been cleared from the board, which left only one name, Leland. The focus of the investigation snapped back with terrifying clarity. Leland had no secret life, no blackmailers. His life was Beaumont Capital. His motive was simple, primal, and immense, the throne itself. Nathaniel pulled out the secure phone and called Ari. After explaining Cassandra's confession, he gave his final order. Forget the wife. Forget the past. I want everything you have on Leland Finch. Every email, every phone call, every financial transaction for the last 10 years. I don't care what it takes. I want to know where he sleeps, what he eats, and who he talks to. The man is a ghost. I want you to find his shadow. He'll be careful, Ari warned. He knows an attempt failed. He'll be covering his tracks. I know, Nathaniel said, his eyes fixed on the darkening horizon. But now so are we. We're going to set a trap so perfect he won't see the bars until it's already slammed shut. The bait for the trap was a deal so monumental it would redefine Beaumont Capital, the acquisition of a cutting-edge German robotics firm, Kybernetic AG. It was a real target Nathaniel had been eyeing for months, but he accelerated the timeline, manufacturing a crisis that required immediate decisive action. This was the kind of high-stakes, high-pressure environment where mistakes were made. He called an emergency board meeting at his estate in the Hamptons for the coming weekend. It was an unusual move, but he framed it as a necessary measure to prevent leaks and move faster than their competitors. The key players would be there, Nathaniel, the board members, and of course his indispensable COO, Leland Finch. In the days leading up to the meeting, Ari Cohen's team worked relentlessly. They dug into Leland's life with the precision of surgeons. On the surface, it was immaculate. His finances were transparent, his investments sound, his personal life boringly stable. He was the model executive, but Ari's specialty was finding the cracks in a perfect facade. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. The IT specialist inside Beaumont Capital found a ghost server, a relic from an old acquisition that was supposed to have been decommissioned years ago, but was still secretly active. On it, they found fragmented data logs, old emails, and transaction records from a project codenamed Caribbean Harvest. The project dated back 10 years. The manager listed on the logs was Leland Finch. The primary asset acquired under the project was a coffee plantation in Haiti, Café Le Ciel. It was the smoking gun that connected Leland to Elodie's past. Viridian Holdings was nothing more than a temporary shell created by Beaumont Capital for a single, deniable operation. Ari delivered the news to Nathaniel in the guest house. "It seems your firm under Finch's direction was responsible for the destruction of the Baptiste family," Ari said, his tone neutral. "Did you authorize an operation codenamed Caribbean Harvest?" Nathaniel searched his memory. The name was vaguely familiar. It was from a period of aggressive expansion. He had likely given a broad directive: secure agricultural assets in the Caribbean region. I want a foothold in the premium coffee market. He would have left the how to his lieutenants, to Leland. He had never asked for the details. He hadn't wanted to know. A sickening realization washed over him. He wasn't just an innocent target. His own ambition, his own willful ignorance had set these events in motion a decade ago. He had created the ghost that now haunted his house. He knew he had to talk to Elodie one more time before the final act. He found her in the main house's kitchen, polishing silver, her movements methodical and precise. He dismissed the other staff and sat down at the large wooden preparation table. "The meeting is this Saturday," he began. "I believe Leland will try something then. We'll be ready." Elodie nodded, placing a silver fork down carefully. "I hope you are right, monsieur. Ari Cohen and his team have confirmed your story," Nathaniel said quietly. "Viridian Holdings was a shell company for my firm. The operation was managed by Leland. What he did to your father, it was done in the name of Beaumont Capital. It was done ultimately in my name." He paused, the confession tasting like ash in his mouth. "I did not know the specifics, but I am responsible, and for that, I am sorry." Elodie looked at him, her dark eyes searching his face. For a long moment, she said nothing. The air was thick with the weight of 10 years of pain and injustice. "When I was a little girl," she said finally, her voice soft, "my father would take me into the fields at dawn. He would crush a roasted coffee bean between his fingers and have me smell it. 'This is our story, Elodie,' he would say. 'The soil, the rain, the sun. It is all here. It is our legacy.' Mr. Finch didn't just take land from us. He took our story." She looked down at her hands. "Thank you for your apology, monsieur. It is more than I ever expected to receive." She looked up again, her gaze clear and steady. "But what matters now is not the past. It is what you do on Saturday." Her words were not an absolution, but a challenge. Justice wasn't an apology. It was an action. Nathaniel left her and went to meet with Ari to finalize the plan for the meeting. The trap was multi-layered. Phase 1 was psychological. Nathaniel would deliberately structure the cybernetic AG deal in a way that mirrored the Caribbean harvest operation, using the same legal loopholes and financial instruments. He would watch Leland's reaction, looking for any sign of recognition or discomfort. Phase 2 was the evidence. Ari's team had not only uncovered the old server logs, but had also, through intense digital forensics, recovered a single damning audio file. It was a fragment of a call Leland had made on a supposedly secure line a week before the gala, talking to an unknown chemist. The audio was corrupted, but Ari's technicians had painstakingly restored a few key phrases: completely untraceable cardiac event, and a complex Bordeaux would mask it perfectly. It was the final nail in the coffin. Phase 3 was containment. The boardroom at the estate was wired with hidden cameras and microphones. Ari's agents, posing as security and technical staff, would be positioned throughout the house. There would be no escape. As Saturday approached, a tense quiet fell over the Beaumont estate. It was the calm before the storm. Leland arrived looking confident and prepared, carrying a briefcase full of projections for the cybernetic deal. Cassandra, now aware of the situation and free from her own blackmailer, Ari's team had persuaded Niko Petrovich to take a permanent vacation, played the part of the devoted wife, though her eyes were shadowed with anxiety. And Elodie Baptiste, the catalyst for it all, moved silently in the background, a phantom of justice waiting for the curtain to rise. She was no longer just a maid. She was a witness. The boardroom was a theater of power. A long, polished mahogany table reflected the grim faces of the 6 board members flown in for the emergency meeting. At the head of the table sat Nathaniel, radiating an aura of absolute command. To his right, in his customary seat, was Leland Finch, looking sharp and focused. Nathaniel opened the meeting, laying out the details of the cybernetic AG acquisition with clinical precision. He was deliberately using phrases and strategic outlines pulled directly from the Caribbean harvest file. We will establish a temporary holding company in a favorable jurisdiction. I'm thinking the Caymans. Nathaniel said, his eyes flicking towards Leland. It provides a layer of deniability and allows us to move aggressively on the smaller shareholders. Outwardly, Leland didn't react. He nodded, jotting down notes. But Nathaniel, watching him with predatory focus, saw it a slight tightening of his jaw, a momentary stillness in his hands. He recognized the playbook. He was proud of it. For an hour they debated the deal. Leland was brilliant as always. He argued points, identified weaknesses, and proposed solutions with his usual sharp intellect. He was the perfect COO, the loyal soldier. The performance was flawless. Then Nathaniel initiated the final phase. "Gentlemen," he said, his tone shifting, "before we vote on this acquisition, there is another matter we must address, an internal one. It has to do with company ethics and past operations. Specifically, a project from 10 years ago, codenamed Caribbean Harvest." The room went still. The board members looked confused. But Leland Finch froze. The color drained from his face. For the first time, the perfect mask cracked. "I'm not familiar with that project," one board member said. "Few are." Nathaniel replied, his voice like ice. It was an off-the-books operation to acquire agricultural assets in Haiti. It was managed by Mr. Finch. Leland found his voice a strained, defensive rasp. "Nathaniel, what is this? That was a minor, successful acquisition from a decade ago. It has no bearing on today's business." "Doesn't it?" Nathaniel countered. He nodded to an aide standing by the door, one of Ori's men. The aide dimmed the lights and turned on the large screen at the end of the room. The first image that appeared was a photograph of a smiling, proud man standing in a coffee field. This was Jean-Pierre Baptiste, the owner of the plantation you successfully acquired. Leland stared at the screen, his composure shattering. You bankrupted him? Leland, ooh! Nathaniel's voice was a low growl of controlled fury. You used a shell company, Viridian Holdings, to strip him of his family's legacy, and then arranged for his death to look like an accident. This is insane, Leland sputtered, looking around at the bewildered board members. He has no proof. This is a baseless accusation. Proof is a funny thing, Nathaniel said calmly. He nodded to the aide again. A new file appeared on the screen, the recovered transaction logs from the ghost server, showing Leland's name tied to every dirty trick used to ruin Baptiste. Leland stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. This is a character assassination. I have been loyal to you for 20 years. Your loyalty only ever extended to yourself, Nathaniel shot back, which brings us to a more recent matter. He nodded a final time. The aide played the audio file. The boardroom was filled with the sound of static, and then Leland's voice, electronically cleaned but unmistakable. Completely untraceable cardiac event. The silence in the room was absolute. A complex Bordeaux would mask it perfectly. Leland looked as if he had been turned to stone. His eyes, wide with panic, darted towards the exits. He saw Ori's men no longer posing as staff, but standing as sentinels. He was trapped. The 1947 Cheval Blanc. Nathaniel, said his voice, dropping to a near whisper. A bold choice, Lee. I almost felt honored. The fight went out of Leland's eyes, replaced by a venomous hatred. You were holding me back. He snarled, his voice a guttural confession. It was my time I built this empire as much as you did. I did the dirty work. I took the risks. I deserved it. He lunged, not for the door, but across the table towards Nathaniel, his hands outstretched like claws. But he never made it. Ari's men were on him in an instant, subduing him with swift, brutal efficiency, pinning him to the table. The boardroom doors opened. 2 uniformed police officers who had been waiting outside stepped in. As they handcuffed a struggling, screaming Leland Finch, the main door opened one last time. Elodie Baptiste stepped into the room. She did not look at the board members or the police. Her eyes were fixed on the man who had destroyed her family. Leland fell silent, his face a mask of disbelief as he stared at the woman he would have dismissed as an invisible servant. He finally understood who had undone him. Elodie looked at him, her face impassive, but her eyes burning with a cold fire. She said nothing. She didn't have to. Her presence was the final verdict. She had not only reclaimed her family's story, she had written the final chapter of his. Justice, silent and patient, had finally been served. In the end, Leland Finch was convicted not only for the attempted murder of Nathaniel Beaumont, but thanks to a reopened investigation fueled by the evidence Ari Cohen uncovered, also for his role in the death of Jean-Pierre Baptiste a decade earlier. Nathaniel, humbled and changed by the ordeal, made a quiet, unpublicized trip to Haiti. He didn't just compensate Elodie Baptiste. He established the Baptiste Foundation, a multi-million-dollar fund dedicated to helping small independent farmers in Haiti, with Elodie at its head, allowing her to restore her family's name and build a new legacy. This story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the most important person in the room is the one nobody sees. It's about the silent strength of a woman who carried a decade of grief and turned it into an unshakable quest for justice. What would you have done in Elodie's place? What about in Nathaniel's? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of intrigue, betrayal, and ultimate justice resonated with you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves a real-life thriller and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories you won't find anywhere else.